Welcome back. Today I'm going to share with you a compositional technique called Dutch angle. It's one of my favorites. It's a technique that you may not have tried, or you do use it and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Basically what it is where the photo ends up being crooked. That's intentional crooked, not unintentional like those horizons that are slightly crooked that I get upset about. So it is deliberately either turning your camera on an angle or doing that in post-processing using an editing app. So I'll show you why we do it, when we do it, how we do it, how much we tilt it, that sort of thing, and explain the background of the Dutch angle. And I'll come back to you after the intro music. So the big question is this: how do smartphone photo enthusiasts like us become that creative and confident photographer we desire and deserve to be, creating those beautiful, impactful photos? This podcast will give you the answers. I'm Mike, and welcome to the Smartphone Photography Club. If you're listening to the podcast, remember I'm on YouTube where I'm talking to you in the camera right now, and also there's an article, blog, tutorial, whatever you want to call it, on my website as well, smartphonephotographytraining.com/tutorials, where you'll find this and many other free tutorials out there for you. Now, this is a compositional technique that it's a great way to get your creative on, get your creative happening. So if you're like me, you struggled with for creativity for just so long, then this is a great technique that's simple to get out there and just experiment once you understand the ideas behind it. And that leads me to, I'll bring this up on the screen now, my 14-day photo creativity challenge. That challenge is all about it's project-based learning. So it gets you out there. Every day I share a tip like this one, where I say, okay, this is why we do this. This is how we do it. Now get out there and take a photo, and encourages you each day for 2 weeks to get out there and little tips like this that they kind of go, oh, wow, I can be creative, and give you that confidence. So that's a great way of doing it. So Dutch angle is, it's not a very traditional compositional technique. It's one that I don't use very often. You do see some people use it all the time. And why do they use it? Well, it adds a lot of energy to a photo. It can add movement, it can add energy, and composition, as you know, is the position of the main subject and other elements within the frame and how they all interact with each other. So if you've got a photo that just has lots of vertical and horizontal lines, it's pretty static. It's pretty, not boring. I wouldn't say boring, because you can make some of those look amazing. But when you tilt it on a bit of an angle, all of a sudden those vertical and horizontal lines, they become angles. They become diagonal lines. So it adds a lot more energy to it. So it can be a lot of fun to get out there and just play around with those, intentionally angling those straight lines. So the easy process is basically at capture just to tilt your camera on a bit of a side. And it can take a little bit of getting used to, because the scene in front of you is nice and straight, and then looking at the camera, you kind of need to tilt your head with the camera to see what the screen is. I know that sounds weird, but do it right now. Just turn on your camera app, point it at something, tilt the camera, and it's actually really hard to visualize what that photo is going to look like unless you tilt your head with the camera. So I give you permission to look silly right now. All right. So when I say it's intentional, I mean a conscious choice to slant the image is what I'm talking about. It's not accidentally crooked like those horizon shots. So Dutching your photos, that's what I call it. I think that's the term, Dutching your photos. It used to be really trendy, but a lot of people would do it, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. They look pretty awful. And the reason is that they don't understand that there's other compositional implications for doing that. It changes the visual weight of different elements in there. The emphasis might then become on something else. Your use of space around that main subject completely changes when you turn it on an angle. It's really important to have that negative and positive space in the frame. It's a technique that's common in cinematography. You might see it in there for that dramatic effect, and it helps portray movement, energy. It can also bring in some unease and disorientation for that desperate or frantic action. So it's what we call visual tension. It can also bring in visual attention. It's really good for street photography as well as another one, because yeah, it adds movement and interest to otherwise static shop front or something like that. So where did it come from? It started from a classic German film. The mispronunciation with the original was douche angle, which is likely where Dutch came from. Has no connection to Dutch people or the Dutch language. And it's why it's also known as the German angle. But I actually haven't heard anyone call it that, but apparently that's what it's also known as. So how do we do that? Well, I'll bring up a photo here on the screen for those that are watching. That'll be helpful, won't it? But if you're not, you'll have to just listen to me try my best to describe what's going on the screen. So here I have a photo of a scooter on the side of the street in Melbourne, and it's centered. So I just wanted to capture it and didn't give much thought to the background. You can see there I have a, what is that in the background? I have electrical solutions. So I've got utes, I've got a transport truck, I've got all these distracting elements in the background. And then when I go and tilt it, all of a sudden, and yes, I've done a lot of editing to this photo when I've tilted it, but there's the original with the scooter parked normal, and then tilting it. I've added a sun flare for those listening. I've added a sun flare behind it. I've added a bit of some tonal changes to it. I've blurred the background. I've done a little bit of work to it, but I just want you to focus on the tilt that's happening there, because that's all of a sudden this is a much more interesting photo instead of just a snapshot taken on the side of the street. So it just goes to show that any photo you can go in there and change it. So how do I do this? I'm just going to show you the tilting part of it. So there is inside your camera editor, you'll have an option there to rotate or straighten, and I know a lot of Android photos. Editors, it's very limited how much you can straighten. It only has a little bit. You can just it's more of a correction, not adding for the effect of a crooked photo. So I use Snapseed. Now in here we've got go into the tool option, and you have there rotate, and rotate you can just go in there and straighten it. And but when it does that, it crops all the edges. Doesn't work so well. So I like to use a perspective tool. And inside there we have another option there called rotate. Okay, so again, just swipe with our finger left and right, and it fills in those blank corners and does an amazing job. So tilting it that way, and that's really as easy as it is. Now the reason why I use that perspective tool is that it doesn't zoom in and crop the photo. It'll just change the angle and fill in areas that it needs to with surrounding content. It's very, very clever the way it does it. You may need to recrop it and recompose it after you tilt it. I would suggest as part of your editing process, if you're going to do if you're going to Dutch the photo, Dutch angle, I would suggest you do that first before you crop it, because once you crop it, then you have a limited amount of pixels there to play with, and then you go start tilting it. So tilt it first and then go and crop it as part of your process. So which way do we tilt it and how much? Well, how much, that's a personal preference, but which way you tilt it, that can have a big impact. This motorbike, if I tilt it that way, okay, so I'm tilting it so that the everything's falling to the left. I'm going to use that term falling because if you can imagine a photo of it with a person in there and they're looking outside of the frame, and then you tilt the photo so that they're on the edge of the frame, and if they haven't been cropped off, they'll be very close to the edge, and they're kind of walking towards the edge of the frame, and they look like they're going to fall off the frame. But if they've turned around and they're looking in towards the middle of the frame, and you've got them down on that bottom corner, looking up into the middle of the frame, it can work. But just be mindful, have a look when you tilt it, just have a look and go, now does it look like this is someone's falling over? does it look like that this is, do I feel a bit of unease or some visual tension? Because the image might have something large on one side of it, and then you go a large element, and then you go and tilt it, and that large element is actually on the upper higher corner of the image to the top of the tilt. What will happen is it'll produce even more visual weight and emphasis on that because it's up the top, and it may look like it's about to roll down the hill and roll over top of everyone. So just be really careful of that. So with this motorbike, this scooter, okay, tilting it both ways actually can work all right. I edited it so that the bottom right corner was angled, and when I did the edit, but it works either way on this because because it's centered and there's no other visual weight happening on either side of it. It can actually work both ways, so it's not too much of a concern then. But you might have some photos where it just doesn't work, and that's why it doesn't work, because you might be introducing some imbalance. Yeah, so that's it. Again, we have the 14-day photo challenge where you can pick up tips like this for 14 days. I send an email through to you, or you can access it all straight away when you register. It's a great way to really accelerate your learning and get out there with other people doing the same challenge at the same time. I have a dedicated group there where everybody shares what they're doing and inspires each other. So it's a lot of fun. Thank you for joining me. I'll wrap it up there, and I will catch you next time. Bye bye.